Hello, welcome to my latest video. My name is Stuart. I'm the Unrepentant Atheist, and this is a special edition because I've got 100 subscribers. I started my channel 1 month ago, and it's just a bit of a landmark, 100 subscribers, and probably the next landmark will be 1,000 if I ever get that far. So just to say that I'm not making these videos for monetization or for money. I just do it purely because I believe the world would be a better place without religion, and I think that the more people that make these kind of videos highlighting that there's no really sound reason to believe in any religion, the better. So if you're an atheist and you're watching this and you feel like I do, perhaps you'll make a video too. It's um, it's not really too hard to do it, and the more of us that make videos, I think the better it will be, because obviously there may be wavering Christians out there who are absolutely overwhelmed with Christian channels, and they may think, oh, well, Christianity is so popular, there are hardly any atheists around, it must be true. But the more of us atheists that make videos, the better chance of pushing religion away, because that's really what we want to do. We want to get rid of religion. We don't need religion. Okay, so let's come back to what the focus of this video is going to be. I'm going to try and keep it down to 10 minutes. I probably won't succeed. But so uh, when to wield your atheist blade, when to put Christians to the sword, or when to spare them. That's what this video is going to be about. And I'd like to say that very, very few people that I know in my own personal life know that I'm a sort of atheist who is actually quite active um, in consuming atheist content. I watch the Atheist Experience, sometimes talk even, debates, Matt Dillahunty's channel, and I do it quite a lot. And of course now I've got my own channel, so I suppose I'm quite a sort of militant or active atheist activist, because obviously I've explained why already. And the question is that we've got this strong feeling in us that we don't believe in God, and we're probably, if you're watching this, you'll probably identify more with atheism than fairly passive atheists who are out there who don't go out of their way to acquaint themselves with what is going on in the world, with Christian apologetics and the atheists who are fighting against it. And I think most people out there who don't believe in God are just passive atheists, and that's what they are. So I believe we're a minority, and I wish there were more active atheists, because I do believe that religion is evil, and I think we need to argue strongly against it and get rid of it. So, so when to wield your atheist blade? Well, that's quite that sounds quite dangerous, the way that I've put it, because I think that you don't necessarily have to put a Christian to the sword. If you're out there in the real world and you're meeting people on a social basis, most of the time it won't be appropriate to put forward your atheism. I only ever do it in situations where somebody has declared their religious belief, and they've shown an interest in my own belief, and you've got to make a very fine judgment about how far you're going to go, and a lot depends on the attitude and the objective of your interlocutor. What do they want out of the exchange? If it comes to an open discussion about religious belief, I tend to try and gauge whether it's a hostile attempt to engage you or not. Most of the time, it won't really be. So if I do get into any kind of situation, it's very rare that religious conversations actually crop up in my social world. Very, very, very rare indeed. But if I'm asked about my religious belief, I will just usually say no. I'm not religious. I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. I will just sort of leave it at that. There's no need to explain further. And if I'm in this, if my interlocutor says, oh well, yeah, I'm a Christian and I'm a practicing Christian, so I go to church, I would just say, well, oh, I see. Um, and I won't really take it any further than that, particularly if it's a social situation. I'm not going to say, why do you believe? And try and expand on it unless they say to me, why are you an atheist? Or, why don't you believe in God? They don't usually. I mean, 9 times out of 10, they don't. And it's very rare that anybody's ever said to me, why don't you believe? And my response to that will be just that I don't really see that there's the evidence to support it. Now, that's where either I will keep my blade in its sheath or I will get it out, because they will then respond and say, well, what do you mean there's no evidence? There's the Bible. Right, okay. Now the swords have been drawn and things are starting to open up. In that kind of situation where somebody is asserting an argument, you move one step at a time. You don't go for the jugular. You don't go for the heart. Of course not. You take it one stage at a time. And then my response would be, well, the Bible isn't really evidence. The Bible is the claim. The Bible makes claims, but they're not corroborated anywhere or supported by any real evidence. And then it will be up to them. And I mean, at that kind of point, most people will just say, oh, well, I've just got faith in God. I just believe it. And in that case, that's the end of the conversation. Or I might, depending on the nuance of the situation, I might then say, well, Muslims have also got faith. And I've not personally seen that faith is a good guide to discovering what the truth of reality is. And actually, that's the kind of thing which, unless a Christian is really well versed in apologetics, will kill the conversation, because there's nowhere really to go from there for your average Christian. Obviously, for those who are fairly well versed in apologetics, that the debate will then kind of start, and the swords will be drawn, and it depends. You see, online situation is different from a real life situation where you're face to face with somebody. I look at the comments pages on YouTube, and I'm horrified a lot of the time at how nasty people are to each other. And that's why on my channel, if I see anybody being abusive, I usually give them a warning. I say, well, don't do that. Don't call each other names. Be respectful. Otherwise, I'll mute you and you won't be able to comment on my channel anymore. Go and do it somewhere else if you're going to do it at all. So, but in a real life situation, you've got to be a bit more diplomatic. I think you should always be diplomatic anyway, even online. I mean, that's my style. And I know that I've used this language about putting Christians to the sword, but in reality, in real life, I would always tread fairly carefully and make my points in quite a sensitive way, and not try to make any kind of sarcastic, or, I mean, any kind of potentially inflammatory language or points. I would try and be, I try to be, when it's happened, I've tried to be as subtle as I possibly can. And usually when I've said, well, faith's not that good a guide to the truth, and which actually it isn't really. And when you say, well, Muslims have got faith, Hindus have got faith, and all the religions have got faith, how do we tell which one of them is true? because Muslims are telling me that their faith is true, but yours is false. And you're telling me that your faith is true and theirs is false. And then a Christian will say, well, it's many fingers pointing to one moon. And then I'll say, well, Muslims say that Jesus is just a prophet. He's not divine. And that's heresy for Christians. Well, okay, so I'm going a bit, and I would say that. I don't think that's inflammatory to say that to a Christian, because it's a fact. I mean, it is factual. That's how Muslims see Jesus. So, being very, very careful about wielding the atheist blade. I probably wield the. I mean, in reality, I probably wield the atheist blade more online than I do in real life. I've been in situations where I have met maybe somebody who is capable of defending themselves against any kind of onslaught, breaking down of a faith-based position with skepticism. For example, at a social gathering on one occasion that my wife happened to be at, I met a professor of theology, and we got talking a little bit. And his big thing was science and religion. His speciality was the relationship between science and religion. Now, for me, it's a completely bogus subject which has got absolutely no value whatsoever in it. But I could come out and say that, and my wife at that time knew that I was, quite a skeptic, and potentially in that social gathering there was a possibility that that conversation could have escalated. She overheard it and she nudged me and she said, "Not now, Stuart." So I kind of backed off a bit on that one. He did give me his card. He did give me his card, and I never responded to him. But that was a situation that, if she hadn't done that, it could potentially have got into quite a heated conversation. And actually, it would have been okay, because I think that when you're making this decision about whether to wield your atheist blade or not, depends on, I suppose, the willingness and also the ability of your interlocutor to converse with you on the same level. If somebody is a fairly simple and straightforward Christian, and they say, "Oh, you're an atheist, you don't believe?" "No, I don't really believe." And you say, "Well, why don't you?" And they say, "Well, why don't you believe?" "Well, I don't really see evidence for it." And they say, "Well, what do you mean? Where's the evidence? I mean, look at the birds, look at the trees." Now, look, that's not an invitation for me. That's not provocation for me to get out my sword and cut down the Christian. Not that I would not respond to that. They said, "Well, look at the bird, look at the trees." I'll say, "Well, what do you see in the birds and trees which tell you there's a God?" And they would say, "Well, must have created all this." And my response would be that, "Well, we've got science which explains how all that happened." So, be fairly straightforward with that sort of thing. But I would deal with points in a very non-combative way. There's no need to get the sword out. And I mean, it's very rare in that kind of situation for it to get out of hand. It's more likely to get out of hand with somebody like an evangelical Christian, a very preachy kind of evangelical Christian, who, discovering that you're an atheist, could potentially threaten you with hell and damnation. Now, that's a situation where, you've got to get your sword out and you've got to cut them down. You really got to cut them down, because, and I've been in one or two situations where people have said that, yes, "Stuart, there's time for you yet, because if you don't, you know what's going to happen to you." Now, in that kind of situation, you're being told that you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. Quite frankly, no holds barred, all the gloves come off, all the swords are out, and you've got full justification for completely using every strategy that you know of and every potential skeptical point to undermine their faith. And then really you've got to say, well, okay, you've said that. Why do you believe that? Why do you believe anything that Christianity's got to say? And they'll go, well, to the Bible. Well, the Bible's the claim. It's not the evidence. There's nothing outside of the Bible. Well, there's Josephus. No, Josephus is a forgery. Scholars are more or less agreed Josephus is a forgery. And all that Josephus is reporting on is that there are Christians who believe this, that, and the other. There's nothing. The only thing factual is that there were Christians who believe this, not that these things actually happened. So you can't use Josephus as evidence. So you see what I mean? You get the sword out and you absolutely cut them down. Because I know what all their points are going to be, because I've spent years listening to the Atheist Experience and going through skeptical forums and discussing these things with Christians and atheists on various websites and comments pages, etc. I already know what they're going to say, so I'm ready for everything that they might say. And if they tell me that I'm going to suffer in hell, that's a time to get your sword out and cut them down. And you can cut them down unless they're exceptionally skillful, which is highly unlikely. So I think just to sum up then about, when to wield the sword, it's when it's merited, particularly when you've been threatened, or if your intelligence is insulted by, if a Christian says anything so crass as any intelligent person can see that there's a God, okay, you've been insulted. You've got to get your sword out, and you've got to go for the jugular. You've got to go for the stab straight through the heart. You've got to cut them to pieces, one bit at a time. If you've been insulted, you've been told that you're going to burn in hell, or anything violent like that, or anything insulting, you've got to gauge the level of reaction to the attack, to the nature of the attack. And the fact is, most of the time, it won't be any kind of attack at all. It will be just a friendly discussion, because most Christians out there are quite reasonable. They're not the gloves off type. And you can have a fairly constructive conversation with them. And at the end of the day, they might say, well, actually, yes, you're right a lot. You're right in a lot of what you say. But, I've got this faith. I've got this really strong feeling. Plus, I've had a personal experience. That's fair enough, and that's the time when I still think that even in those situations, for the cause of wiping religion from the face of this planet, I still think it's a good idea to leave a Christian with a subtle point that they can maybe think about. You don't have to get your sword out. Leave them with a subtle point. And about personal experience, I would always say, well, I've had profound personal experiences too, but I didn't really interpret them in quite the same way that you've done. I just put it down to the mystery of existence, and that I'm sure there's some kind of naturalistic explanation to how I felt at that time. But obviously, you've put your own interpretation on it, and I respect that. I can't say if you're right or wrong. I don't know. And you can leave it at that. So, of course, if they turn around and say, well, that's a shame because you realize that when you die, you're going to hell. Okay, well, different ball game. Get your sword out. So just to sum up then, it's all about as I said before, the nature of the attack, the hostility of the attack. If the hostility is there, then you sharpen your blade and you go for the jugular. But if it's good-natured conversation, and if there's no hostility, if there's genuine goodwill, then there's no need to do that. The key is subtlety, and leave them with something to think about. As I mentioned about, personal experience, they believe for personal experience. Just leave them with a little, maybe a little gem, a little diamond that they can take away. They don't know it's a diamond. But if you sort of give it to them, they might realize later on, and who knows, they might think, well, actually, maybe I didn't put the right, maybe that experience has got a naturalistic explanation. I've interpreted it as God, but I mean, maybe it isn't. Maybe it was just, this amazing feeling I had inside myself, this feeling of awe for the universe. Maybe it's not God. Maybe it's actually just, sort of this amazing feeling that a child has, for example, when it looks up at the stars, and it doesn't mean there's a God. And who knows? They might actually come around to abandoning their faith. They probably won't, but I still think that it's a good principle to leave a subtle point like that with a Christian or with a believer so that they can take it away without completely trying. And you don't have to try and completely break them down, which is no good at all. It's not constructive, and it's hostile, and you should never do that except when they've challenged you that way. And let the hostility come first. You let the hostility come first, and then you respond on the same level. That's what it's all about. Gauge the level, gauge your response to the level, and you will very rarely have to take out your sword. Online is a slightly different ballgame, because online you're not face to face. You haven't got that two-way proper human interaction. You don't see each other, and that's why people insult and offend each other online. That's why you see, oh, you idiot, you stupid dumbass, you've got absolutely no ability to reason whatsoever. Go and get yourself educated. I mean, look, people don't say these things to each other face to face. I don't think so. I personally have never said that to nobody's ever said that to me face to face, and yet online people are taking out their swords and trying to cut each other down. The internet, in many ways, it brings out the worst in people, and that's why on my comments on my videos on my channel, because I haven't got so many comments as someone like Atheist Experience, I can moderate my own comments. If I see people being abusive, I usually I'll post a warning and say, keep it civilized, no bad language, no insults. Well, bad language, I'm not bothered about that. It's insults that I'm bothered about. Don't insult each other. Keep it to, proper debating level, and make your point. Be critical with each other, but anybody who starts insulting, they won't be on my channel for long, because I've got this magical thing that I can do. I can just mute them, and they can go elsewhere and they can do that. So interestingly, on my channel so far, I've muted 2 people, both Christians, unfortunately. It's very sad, but most of the time I've seen and I've observed that the most abusive people who leave comments are actually Christians. It's very disappointing, very disappointing. I just wish that they would, be polite and reasonable. And most of them are. It's just a few. So what can you do? Okay, so nothing more to say on that. No need to put Christians to the sword on the whole, unless you're threatened, unless you're told you're dumb or you're going to burn in hell, then it's justifiable. But otherwise, there's no need to do it. And if you've got a dying grandmother and she's dying of cancer and you're standing at her bedside and she asks you, do you believe in God? And you know that she does, what are you going to say? You're not going to take your sword out, are you? No, you're going to say, I believe in God, Grandma, and I'm praying for your soul. Of course you're going to say that, because it's a reasonable and compassionate thing to do. It's acceptable at times to tell a white lie. Okay, well, that's all I've got to say. Comments below, keep it polite. And yeah, so I've got 100 subscribers, which I'm amazed at, that 100 people, obviously seem to like my presentation and the content of my videos. So that's flattering, and I'm intending to expand my channel and do lots of more topics. So I'll say goodbye for now and look forward to seeing you again soon.